If something is free, then you're the product. It's a quote attributed to Richard Serra. And I think that there's no greater example of that than Google. Google is an ecosystem, is almost entirely free, soup to nuts, which means that within Google, you're the product, which makes all the sense in the world. They're selling you to advertisers. And the more data Google has on you, the richer the product that they're selling, the more information that they're able to append, which is the point of this video is really understanding Google as an ecosystem, because you can't use Google as an advertiser until you understand Google as an ecosystem. So if you were to ask somebody off of the streets, you pull somebody off the street and say, hey, what is Google? Their immediate response is going to say, well, Google's a search engine, which is true, kind of. Google is a search engine. And if you think of Google as a search engine, that alone becomes terrifying when you start to think about what it is that Google knows about you. As a search engine, Google knows things like your semantic index, how you search, your relative level of education, what you're afraid of, what diseases you might have, things that you're concerned with or worried about. Google knows your knowledge graph. Think about that for a moment. Google knows where you are ignorant, where you're wrong. And it does that because everything you've searched or ever will search is being appended to your user record, even things that you're searching for in an incognito window. Google doesn't say it won't track those things. It just doesn't show up in your history. Your search record is being used in order to identify who you are, what you do, what you're going to do, and allow Google's predictive engine to take place. So that alone, you're like, oh my goodness, gosh, Big Brother's watching us. Yes, of course. But Google's not just search. That's where this conversation gets really, really interesting. Google's also YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet. It's the largest video repository in existence. And it's where people go to emote, to learn, to listen to music, to research things. So the Google ecosystem is expanded, many-fold when you think about the reach and permeation of YouTube. And that, again, is being appended to your record. Everything you do inside of YouTube. Google knows your interests and how you're going to vote, what it is that you're paying attention to, how to piss you off. But Google's not just YouTube, it's also Gmail. It's the largest free email utility on the planet, becoming one of the largest enterprise utilities on the planet. Google reads every single email you send and receive, emails and attachments. And you might say, well, Cosmo, I'm safe because I don't use Gmail. You're not safe because you communicate with people that use Gmail. Guaranteed, which means that Google by proxy can track the things that you're saying too. So, the conversations you're having, who you're talking to, who you lie to, whether or not you fib, what your tax returns look like if those have been sent to you by your CPA recently, what prescription medicine you might be taking, event invites that you've received and RSVP'd to. But Google's not just Gmail, it's also the entire Google app suite. So think like Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Presentations, which is I'm actually using for this video. Google knows everything that you've ever saved inside a Google Drive. Google knows that book that you've been working on, probably has all your social security information. Google knows what my children look like in Google Photos. It's crazy. And it's able to track their progress. My eldest son's name is Sammy. And Google will show me montages of Sammy starting from birth to he is now 8 years old. And it's able to identify that it's the same person. And when I upload photos, it tags Sammy without me asking Google to tag Sammy, which is freaking insane. It's also Google Maps. Everybody, regardless of your OS, probably has Google Maps in their pocket, which means Google knows where you work, where you live, where you play, where your kids go to school, whether or not you speed. If it takes 30 minutes to get from point A to point B and you get there in 25 minutes, you get car insurance ads. Google's also Android, which is the largest operating system on the planet. Google knows who you call, who calls you, who you text, who you ignore, what apps you download, and you think, well, I don't use Android. That's okay. You communicate with people that use Android. So again, by proxy, Google is also tracking you. Google's Chrome, which is the largest browser with currently 60% market share according to W3 Counter, which means it knows every website that you visit, what you do on those sites, how frequently you go to those sites, what you bookmark, what you cache, what you copy. When you're trying to hide, Google's the Google Display Network, which reaches 90% of all internet users on the planet, 65% of whom are reached on a daily basis. That sources think with Google. Google is, and this is maybe the scariest one, Google Analytics, which is on nearly 90% of all known websites, or it was before the European Union threw its fit, which means Google knows everything that's ever been done, even behind firewalls and gates and logins. And to get really awkward, Google knows who's HIV positive, who's in Narcotics Anonymous, who's about to declare bankruptcy, who's cheating on their spouse, what kind of pornography you watch. Google knows everything there is to know about everything you've ever done online, which results in this. Google told me I was pregnant before I knew I was pregnant, based solely on my search and communication patterns. This is a case study, public case study from April 2015. from April 2015. This is 8 years ago. Moore's law says that machine computing power doubles every 18 months or something like that. So what does Google know now? Google can tell you you're going to do something before you know you're going to do it, obviously. And advertisers have been doing this for quite a bit of time. I remember I used to advertise with Clear Channel Radio through another business that I owned, and they came with this big binder of this demographic information, and they had all of these catalytic events, and they knew if you just had a baby, within 6 months you're going to buy a new car. They knew that for a fact. And it was like this ubiquitous truth. And they explained, looking at all the data that they'd compiled, it was, 90% of people who have a baby, buy a car. Those little catalytic events. Well, that's what people have been able to pull together using observable data in the human mind. What does a machine learning mechanism with incalculable amounts of data on every human being on the planet, what does it end up being able to reverse engineer? From little teeny minute things to, I know people buy blue light blocking glasses as soon as they've read this article or seen this documentary, to really big things to, I actually know what it would take to get somebody to get married. You can take somebody who never wants to get married, but if they're exposed to this, have this life event, do that, and then, participate at this, that person is going to get married. And what's interesting to think about is 2 tiers. Number one, Google can track who those events are happening to. So it knows, okay, this person's, wasn't accessible to marriage prior to, is accessible now. Number 2, and this is where things get really terrifying, what's to stop them from forcing the event? What's to stop Google from going, well, gosh, we have a bunch of wedding dresses to sell. Let's go get more people married. So I'm going to start encouraging you to read this article, watch this documentary, view this thing, join this club, travel to this place. And I know that those experiences in that sequence catalyze your biological clock ticking, and now you want to get married or whatever, buy a Peloton. Marriage maybe is a bad example, but Google knows the path to purchase. It knows everything that you're doing online. It's able to track everything, and it's able to deliver you information along any level of analysis. So our ability to be manipulated is incalculable. And as an advertiser, and the reason I'm making this video is you have to know that. You have to know how Google works in order to rely on the machine learning. You have to know how Google works in order to rely on the machine learning. Because if you let Google go, now some of this is you're like, gosh, why would we use this? This feels like we're using the forces of evil, and some of that's like it's a balance of risks, and maybe even up to you. Make sure you're using this for good. This is bad in the wrong hands, good in the right hands. But there's no question that we can target people according to things that we shouldn't be able to target them according to. You can target people according to their sexual orientation based on the apps that they have downloaded on their phone. It's not right. But it's a practical reality right now. And so as an advertiser, you need to know that this is possible, and then you need to know how to use it. And it also means very often you have to, if we're dealing with, massive amounts of data, and the larger your audience, the more data you're dealing with, you have to give Google the opportunity to kind of identify the path to purchase that you're working with. So anyway, I hope I haven't scared you too much. Or maybe it's good that I have, but the prerequisite to using Google properly is knowing exactly how it works. And so that's why I'm shooting this video. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you tomorrow. I want you to imagine in your mind's eye one of those old-fashioned auctions. But there's some variables here. The auctioneer, instead of being an impartial third party, is actually the person that makes money from anything that you bid on or buy. So that's big change number one.